2 rockets left the launcher that night. The first one missed, the second didn't. In the dark, over a valley that had already buried a dozen foreign armies before this one, it found a helicopter carrying some of America's most elite warriors in what would become the deadliest single incident for US forces in the war in Afghanistan. 3 months earlier, another squadron from the same elite Navy Special Warfare Unit had carried out the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. Tonight, that unit was about to suffer a devastating loss. This is the true story of Extortion 17. Welcome to Tragic Flights. Every tragedy has a story, every disaster has a cause, and every flight leaves lessons behind. If you never want to miss the stories behind these events, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes of Tragic Flights. Let's begin. Friday, August 5th, 2011. The Tangi Valley, Wardak Province, Afghanistan, roughly 35 miles southwest of Kabul. For a decade, this stretch of river and farmland had been one of the most hostile pockets of the entire war. American troops established an outpost in the valley in 2009, but by 2011, US forces had withdrawn from it as Taliban influence in the area grew. That evening, intelligence picked up something worth the risk of going back in. A Taliban commander named Qari Tahir was believed to be meeting with his fighters at a compound designated Objective Lefty Grove. Tahir had run this stretch of Wardak since June, when the same task force killed the man who'd held the job before him, a commander named Din Mohammed. Just after 10:30 that night, a platoon of US Army Rangers, close to 50 men, lifted off from a base in neighboring Logar province aboard 2 Chinook helicopters. The Chinook is the workhorse of American war, 2 massive rotors instead of 1, built to haul dozens of troops and tons of gear into places smaller aircraft can't reach. One of those 2 helicopters that night carried the call sign Extortion 17. Its job was simple: drop the Rangers, return to base, and wait. The Rangers hit the compound just after 11 that night. Tahir wasn't inside. Some of his fighters were, and in the chaos of the raid, several of them bolted into the darkness surrounding the compound. This far into the war, nearly 10 years in, raids like this one happened constantly. Task forces in Wardak had been running operations almost every other night for weeks, chasing exactly this kind of lead. Nobody watching from the surveillance aircraft overhead knew it yet. But the fighters disappearing into the darkness were about to turn a routine raid into the deadliest night American forces would suffer during the war in Afghanistan. This wasn't a Night Stalker crew. Most people assume a raid like this belongs to the Army's 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the legendary Night Stalkers. In this part of Afghanistan, conventional Army aviation units also regularly supported special operations missions. This was simply one of them. 2 citizen soldiers sat up front. Chief Warrant Officer David Carter, 47, flew for the Colorado Army National Guard. He'd logged more than 4,000 hours behind the controls of a Chinook. Beside him sat Chief Warrant Officer Brian Nichols, 31, an Army reservist out of Kansas on his 3rd combat tour. Behind them, 3 more citizen soldiers ran the guns and the ramp. Sergeant Alexander Bennett, Specialist Spencer Duncan, just 21, and Staff Sergeant Patrick Hamburger. Weekday jobs, weekend drills, now flying into some of the most dangerous airspace on the planet. Waiting in reserve back at base was a very different kind of force. 15 operators from Gold Squadron of the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, better known publicly as SEAL Team 6, plus 2 more from a West Coast team. Their troop commander, Lieutenant Commander Jonas Kelsall, had grown up in Shreveport, Louisiana, playing soccer with a kid named Robert Reeves. They graduated from the same high school. Both joined the military not long after. Both became SEALs. Kelsall had gone the officer route through Navy ROTC at the University of Texas, where he met the woman he'd married 3 years before that helicopter ride. He and his childhood best friend were on the aircraft together that night, but they would never return home together. Alongside them, explosive ordnance experts, a cryptologist named Michael Strange, and a dog handler named John Dwangdara, 26, who everyone called Jet Li. His dog, an assault dog named Bart, went everywhere he went, including into a valley 8,000 miles from home. 3 more Americans rounded out the reinforcements, all from the Air Force's 24th Special. Tactics Squadron, Combat Controller Andrew Harville, and Pararescueman John Brown, and Daniel Zerbe, the men trained to run straight into gunfire to treat and evacuate the wounded. But there would be no opportunity for them to use those skills that night. For Extortion 17's 5-man crew, This would be their second flight into the Tangi Valley that night. For hours after the Rangers landed, the cameras circling overhead watched a strange thing happen. A pair of fighters slipped out of the compound. By the time anyone raised an alarm, that number had grown past 9. Whatever Tahir's men were doing, they weren't running, they were gathering. Before midnight, Apache gunships engaged another group of armed fighters north of the compound, killing several of them. But elsewhere in the valley, another group remained under surveillance. The larger group, the one nobody had engaged yet, kept growing anyway. 2 men, then more. Every one of them a possible answer to the question everybody on that radio net was already asking. Was Tahir himself standing in that crowd? Commanders now faced another problem. They believed Tahir might be among the fighters moving north, and the Rangers could not simply abandon the operation at the compound to pursue them. At 1 a.m., the decision came down: send in the reserve. 50 minutes later, commanders approved a new landing zone that had been considered before but never used, giving the incoming force a different approach into the valley. Then came a decision that would receive intense scrutiny after the crash. Rather than split the reinforcements across 2 aircraft, commanders loaded all 33 of them, SEALs, airmen, 7 Afghan commandos, and an interpreter named Syed Jawid Sadat, onto a single helicopter. The new landing zone could only fit 1 Chinook at a time anyway. The plan depended on speed and surprise. Get everyone on the ground before anyone below could react. At approximately 2:22 a.m., Extortion 17 lifted off for a second time, carrying 33 passengers and the same 5-man crew that had flown the first insertion hours earlier. A sister aircraft, Extortion 16, followed nearby carrying only its own crew, while all 33 members of the reinforcing force rode aboard Extortion 17. Nobody aboard Extortion 17 knew that somewhere in the darkness below, Taliban fighters who had gone undetected by the surveillance overhead were about to turn their attention toward the approaching helicopter. The shots came from high ground near a small village, less than half a mile from where Extortion 17 was about to touch down, the kind of terrain that swallows 2 men completely once the sun goes down. As Extortion 17 descended toward the landing zone, previously unseen Taliban fighters opened fire with rocket-propelled grenades. The first round missed. The second one didn't. It struck one of the blades of the helicopter's aft rotor and detonated, tearing away more than 10 feet of it in an instant. A Chinook flies on 2 rotors working in perfect balance against each other. Lose a meaningful piece of either one, and there's no balance left to fly on. The RPG strike catastrophically damaged the rotor system. With the Chinook barely above the valley floor, the crew had almost no time to react. The aircraft crashed within seconds. All 38 people aboard Extortion 17 were killed. About 30 seconds later, an Apache pilot circling nearby transmitted the words that confirmed the catastrophe. Fallen angel. On the ground, Rangers who'd already survived 1 firefight that night now had to move cross-country, on foot, in the dark, through terrain seeded with hidden bombs, just to reach whatever was left of their friends. A 20-man Pathfinder unit was deployed to secure the crash site. They reached the wreckage within the hour and set up a security perimeter around it, standing guard through the night in enemy territory until more help could arrive. There was nothing left to save. Only the long, careful work still ahead of them. The recovery operation lasted 4 days. A flash flood tore through the valley partway through, scattering debris and making an already difficult recovery even harder. Working in a war zone to bring everyone home. Now the only question left was whether any of it could have been stopped. Within days, 2 separate teams were picking through what remained of Extortion 17. One examined the metal itself, piece by piece, to identify exactly what kind of weapon had brought it down. The other, led by Army Brigadier General Jeffrey Colt, a helicopter pilot himself with years in special operations aviation, spent weeks on a harder question. Could this have been prevented? Investigators found no evidence that Extortion 17 had flown into a pre-planned trap. Investigators found no evidence of a leak, an informant, or advanced Taliban knowledge of Extortion 17's flight path. The report also answered 2 questions that had followed the families since the first briefing. Were the fighters who fled the original compound responsible for the shootdown? Apache crews tracked them to a different building more than a mile away. Investigators concluded that the fighters tracked from the original compound were not the men who fired on Extortion 17. Was it a mistake to place the entire 33-person reinforcing force aboard one Chinook? Investigators concluded that the decision was tactically sound given the landing zone, which could accommodate only one Chinook, and the need to insert the force quickly. But where was the black box? Extortion 17 was not equipped with the type of cockpit voice and flight data recorders familiar from commercial airliners. Not every question closed as cleanly. Years later, retired Air Force Captain Joni Marquez offered a different account of one part of that night. Marquez, who had served as the fire control officer aboard an AC-130 gunship circling above the valley, said publicly that she had watched two surviving fighters from an earlier engagement crawling away and had twice requested permission to engage them. She says both requests were denied under the rules of engagement in place that night. Marquez's account differs from the official reconstruction of the fighters' movements that night. She believes the two men she saw survive an earlier engagement were connected to the eventual shoot-down. The official investigation did not reach that conclusion. But she wasn't the only person who still had questions. Some families of those killed aboard Extortion 17 continued questioning aspects of the mission and investigation. Among them was Charles Strange, father of Navy cryptologist Michael Strange, who became one of the most outspoken family members seeking additional answers. In February 2014, those concerns reached Congress. The House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security held a hearing titled Afghanistan, Honoring the Heroes of Extortion 17, where Defense Department officials publicly addressed questions surrounding the mission, investigation, and treatment of the fallen. The official investigations found no evidence that Extortion 17 had been sent into a trap or that its flight had been compromised in advance. But for some families, questions remained. 30 Americans died aboard Extortion 17 that morning. 11 of them had enlisted only after September 11, 2001, drawn into a war that was already 10 years old by the time it finally caught up with them, thousands of miles from home, in a valley most Americans had never heard of. Extortion 17 was never really a whodunit. Investigators knew early on what had brought the helicopter down. What proved far more difficult was answering every question raised by the families left behind. 15 years later, Extortion 17 remains the deadliest single incident for American forces in the war in Afghanistan and the greatest single incident loss in naval special warfare history. Rest in peace to the 30 Americans, the 7 Afghan commandos, and the Afghan interpreter who lost their lives aboard Extortion 17, and to Bart, who went wherever his handler went, even into that valley. If this story moved you, make sure to share it, leave a like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tragic Flights.